Mara Ellison pressed her thumb against the boy's jaw and said, "Open." He sat cross-legged on the packed earth, shoulders drawn tight, his thin hands pressed into his knees as if he were holding himself in place. The rawhide thong that tied his dark hair back cut a line against the nape of his neck, and his sightless eyes stared past Mara's shoulder, clouded and unfocused. Around them, men watched in a loose circle, hands never far from the knives at their belts. One of those men was his father. Chief Nantan stood just behind Mara, close enough that she could feel the weight of his silence even without turning. She did not need to see his face to know that every move she made was being measured, weighed, judged. Every breath she took in that lodge might be the one before he decided she had failed his son and did not deserve to walk out again. "Open," Mara repeated, gentler this time. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." The boy's jaw trembled under her thumb. Mara heard the soft scrape of his teeth parting. He obeyed not because he trusted her, she thought, but because he could hear his father's breathing behind her, steady, contained, dangerous. "He understands you?" she asked quietly, not looking away from the boy's face. "He understands more than he speaks," came Nantan's low reply. His English carried the clipped edges of a tongue that preferred different shapes, but every word landed clean. "You see his eyes. You know why you are here. Do not waste his pain with questions." Mara bit the inside of her cheek and leaned closer. The boy's name was Tazhi. The interpreter at the army post had told her that on the ride here, muttering it like a warning, like a word that might make trouble roll down off the ridges and swallow the little town whole. Nantan's only son, blind since the night of the raid on the freight line, when a wagon had gone up in a roar of light and a spray of broken glass. She had seen boys like him before, in mining camps and river towns, eyes gone milky, lids crusted, visions stolen by infection or injury, while grown men argued about whose fault it had been and whether anybody could afford a doctor. Only this time, the boy's father was a chief, and the army surgeon who usually stitched up soldiers wanted no part in walking into an Apache camp. So they had sent for Mara. She cupped Tazhi's chin, her fingers calloused from years of rough work, instead of the neat, ink-stained hands her instructors in Boston had once imagined for her. The boy's skin was hot. Not fever hot, but the kind that came from sitting near a cook fire too long, from being watched, from knowing that every twitch might be read as weakness. "Lift your eyes toward my voice," she murmured. "I won't hurt you if I can help it." Tazhi swallowed. His throat bobbed once. Then those clouded eyes tipped up in her direction, though they didn't land on her. They drifted a finger's width too high, fixed on nothing. She had been told he saw only darkness. Mara leaned even closer until she could smell smoke in his hair and the faint tang of herbs someone had rubbed on his temples. Not the sour rot of long infection. Something sharper, clean. Someone had already tried to save him. "Hold his shoulders," Nantan said behind her. Two pairs of hands settled on Tazhi's thin shoulders from behind, big and unyielding. The boy barely flinched. He had been held down before, Mara realized, for medicine, for prayers, for whatever mixture of both the people around him believed might bring his sight back. Mara reached for the small leather satchel at her side, fingers closing around the familiar worn flap. She rested it on her lap and unbuckled it with slow, deliberate movements. She let the Apache men see what she did, every instrument, every choice. "You will use knives," one of them said sharply in his own language. Mara glanced up, catching only the gist from his tone and the way the others stiffened. Nantan answered him with a single phrase that cut the air like an axe. The man fell silent, though his jaw worked. "She will do what must be done," the chief told his men in English for Mara's benefit. "We agreed. She does her work. Then we decide her price." Her price. The interpreter at Fort Helper had laughed a little when he detranslated that part of the agreement. "Don't worry, miss. They mean horses, blankets, maybe a share of whatever trade they got going. They don't mean your scalp." Then his eyes had skated away from hers, and he'd added, "Probably. Mara had come anyway." Now, kneeling here in the chief's lodge, with a blind boy's face between her hands, she found that her fear had gone quiet. Not gone, exactly, just pushed to the edges. Like a skittish horse that had decided to watch from the far side of the corral instead of breathing down her neck. "Let's look at you," she breathed. She eased Tazhi's lower lid down with her thumb and lifted the upper lid with a fingertip. Careful, careful, careful. The cornea beneath was clouded, a pale film like old river glass. Behind it, the pupil was a muddled shadow. But there, she narrowed her focus, breath-catching. There was a glimmer. Not the ordinary way light caught a damaged eye. Not the faint pearly sheen of scar. This was something else, something too hard, too bright, like a tiny chip of metal winking from the bottom of a well. Mara's stomach tightened. Behind her, Nantan shifted his weight. The rawhide in his braids creaked. "What do you see?" "I see?" Mara hesitated. The lies came first, easy and tempting. She could say infection. She could say scar tissue. Words everyone in the territory understood. Words that did not involve the unknown. But Nantan had invited her into his camp, sat her before his son, and put his warriors between her and the outside world. It was not the sort of hospitality you returned with lies. "I see something that shouldn't be there," she said. Something inside the eye itself. A murmur ran around the circle. She heard leather creak, heard someone's breath turn sharp. Like a curse, one of the older men muttered in Apache. Tazhi flinched at the word. Mara understood enough of the language to catch it. Curse. She heard the fear folded inside it, the memory of stories told low at night about men whose eyes filled with ghosts or smoke or the shadows of enemies. "No," she said firmly before anyone could seize that word and salt it into the air, like something that was forced in. A shard, a piece of metal or glass. It's catching the light when it shouldn't. "Glass?" Nantan's voice sharpened. Mara nodded slowly, though she knew he couldn't see her gesture. His attention was on his son. "He was near a wagon when it exploded," she reminded him gently. "You told me that yourself." "I told you the white men's powder took his sight," Nantan said, and now there was fire in his tone, banked but fierce. "I did not say it buried itself inside him like a snake." Mara meant to answer carefully, but she barely heard her own voice over the thud of her pulse. Something inside his eye. She had seen embedded fragments before in cheeks, in scalps, in hands that had tried too late to shield the face from flying stone. She had once spent 2 hours under lamplight, pulling bone splinters out of a railroad foreman's leg. Her shoulders locked, her fingers cramping so bad she'd had to soak them in cold water afterward. But a fragment lodged deep in the eye itself. Her mind skated over the memory of a thick anatomy book, of illustrations inked by some European doctor who had never set foot west of the Mississippi. She remembered diagrams of the eye, layered and delicate. Cornea, iris, lens, a soft globe made to gather light, not hard enough to fight intruders. "Nantan," she said quietly, "I can't be certain until I look closer. But if there is something in there, we may be able to take it out. If we do nothing, he will stay as he is. If we try." "If you try and fail," the chief said, "does he lose more than he has already lost?" Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. There isn't much more for him to lose, where sight is concerned, but there is risk. There's always risk when you cut where you cannot easily mend. Silence folded around them. She imagined the boy's world, the dark behind his eyes, the feel of hands on his shoulders, the smell of smoke and dust and men. Fear on top of that, layered like blankets in winter. Mara lifted her fingers away from his lids, giving him a moment to breathe freely. "Tazhi," she said softly, using his name on purpose. "Can you hear me?" His head turned slightly toward her. "I hear." His voice was higher than she expected, rough at the edges as if he didn't use it much. "You know why your father asked me here?" "You cut men," he said after a pause. "You cut, and sometimes they live." One of the younger warriors huffed a laugh at that bald summary. Mara's lips twitched despite herself. "I try to make sure they live," she said. "I put things back where they belong. I take out what should never have been inside." Tazhi's milky gaze shifted. It did not focus, but it searched, as if drunk on the possibility of something he could not fully name. "You would cut my eyes," he whispered. Mara's throat tightened. She glanced at Nantan. "I will do nothing to you without your say-so," she said firmly. "Not even with your father watching. Do you understand me? This is your body. Your choice." A murmur rolled around the circle again. The words choice and body did not fall the same way in every tongue, but the intent was clear enough. Nantan's jaw flexed. He said nothing. For a moment, Mara thought she had overstepped, that she was about to lose whatever thin trust she had earned by riding into this camp alone. Then Nantan did something she had not expected. He came around to stand in front of his son. The chief went to one knee with a grunt, the many small bones woven into his hair clicking softly. He placed his hand flat on Tazhi's chest, feeling the young man's heart hammer under his palm. "You hear her," Nantan said in his own language now, low and steady. "She will not do this if you do not say the word. But understand, my son, we have called for help from the outside. We have opened our circle and let in a woman whose people have done us harm. Because I am not yet willing to leave you in darkness, if there is one more path, however narrow. You and I must walk that path together, or not at all." Tazhi lifted his chin, the muscles in his jaw working. Mara kept her hands still in her lap. She did not understand every word Nantan spoke, but she understood a father's plea in any language. She thought of her own father, then of the day Dee left their small house back east with her bag and her stubbornness and a letter of admission to a medical college that did not yet know how much they did not want her. He had stood in the yard with dust on his boots. His hands half reached toward her and then pulled back. "You'll be alone out there," he'd said. She had answered, "I already am." Now, seeing Nantan kneel before his son, she felt a pang of something old and complicated twist beneath her ribs. "I am already in darkness," he said slowly. Then, more firmly, enunciating each word as if he were hammering stakes into the ground, "If there is a path, I will walk it." Nantan bowed his head for a heartbeat, his hand still on his son's chest. Then he rose and looked at Mara. "You heard him." "I did," she whispered. Her hands no longer felt still. They felt alive, capable, terrified. She closed her satchel and rose carefully to her feet, her knees popping. She had been kneeling too long. "I need more light," she said, "and water that has been boiled, clean cloths. One of my instruments must be heated before I can use it." She hesitated. "And I need a place where I can work without too many people crowding in. 2 men, perhaps 3, to help steady him if he moves." No more. Nantan took this in without nodding. His face remained carved stone, but she saw his gaze flick once around the lodge, counting, measuring the men who might be chosen. "You will have what you need," he said. "But you will not leave the camp." Mara inclined her head. "I wasn't planning to." A few of the warriors exchanged glances as if surprised by the answer. Nantan spoke a short command. 3 men peeled away from the circle and moved to obey. One banked the fire in the center, not describing flames, but shifting coals, adding fuel, angling it so that light would fall where Mara chose to sit. Another strode out through the hanging flap at the lodge entrance, his steps quick and purposeful. The third knelt to speak softly in Tazhi's ear. Mara watched the way the young man's fingers flexed on his knees. the restless movement of someone bracing himself against a future he could not see. "We will work here?" she asked. Nantan shook his head. "Not in the heart of my lodge. There is a smaller shelter beside it. Quieter, fewer eyes." His gaze cut to her satchel. "You bring your tools. I bring my son." He turned and spoke again. Two women who had been hovering near the back moved forward quickly. One gathered blankets. The other touched Tazhi's shoulder, murmuring something that made his tense mouth ease for a heartbeat. Mara waited until the boy had been helped to his feet before she slung her satchel over her shoulder. As she stepped aside to make room for them to pass, a tall figure near the lodge wall shifted, blocking her path for a moment. She looked up, startled. It was the only non-Apache face in the room besides her own. Elias Ward had ridden in with her from the fort, ostensibly as her escort, more likely as the Army's eyes. He had worn a soldier's blue once, but he traded it for a plain shirt and a vest with spots of old blood he never talked about. His jaw was dark with scruff, and a scar cut through one eyebrow like a pale lightning bolt. "Doc," he murmured, dipping his head the smallest bit. "You sure about this?" She bristled at the nickname, though it wasn't the first time she'd heard it from him. "Are you planning to carry me back to the fort over your saddle if I say no?" she asked under her breath. Elias's gaze flicked to Nantan, to Tazhi, then back to her. "Planning to carry you out if they decide you failed," he said. His tone was so light that anyone watching might have taken it for a jest. Mara heard the steel beneath it. "I won't fail him just to save my own skin," she replied. "If I walk away without trying everything I can, I'll carry that longer than any scar." Something in Elias's expression softened, just a fraction. "Didn't figure you for the quitting kind," he said. "Just needed to hear you say it." He stepped aside, letting her pass. Outside the lodge, the camp spread in a rough circle of shelters and cook fires. Mara did not let her gaze linger. She had seen enough on the way in children, peering from behind skirts, older men with quiet eyes, girls with woven baskets on their backs. This was not a camp of faceless enemies, but of families, of stories woven tight. The smaller shelter Nantan had mentioned stood close by, its frame of poles wrapped in hides, its entrance low. Someone had already cleared a space inside. A folded blanket lay on the ground where Tazhi would sit. A clay pot steamed near the back, and beside it a stack of fresh cloths waited. Mara knelt inside, setting her satchel within easy reach. The three chosen warriors followed with Tazhi between them. He moved with the careful, bruised grace of someone who had learned the shape of the world by counting steps instead of landmarks. "Sit," Mara said gently, patting the blanket. Tazhi folded himself down, his hands once more landing on his knees. Nantan ducked through the entrance behind him, taking a place to the side where he could see both his son's Hisei's and Mara's hands. Elias did not come in. That was fine. This was not his circle. Mara drew in a slow breath. "Before we begin," she said, looking from Tazhi to Nantan, "I need you both to understand what I will do." She opened her satchel again and drew out a thin metal instrument wrapped in cloth. Its narrow tip gleamed dully. "This is a needle," she said. "Not the kind for sewing clothes. This one is for opening a small path where there wasn't one before. I will use it to touch the outside of your eye, Tazhi. Just the outer layer. You will feel pressure. Maybe a sting. I will not go deeper unless I am sure it is the only way to reach what shouldn't be there." Tazhi's fingers curled slowly into fists. "If you must go deeper?" Nantan asked. "Then I will tell you before I do it," Mara said. "Both of you. You will know every step. This thing you believe is inside him," Nantan said. "If you take it out, he will see again." Mara's heart squeezed. Honesty, she reminded herself. Always honesty, even when it cost her the dream she wanted to hand them. "I cannot promise that," she said softly. "If the shard has been there long, it may have damaged what it touched. But I can promise that leaving it in will not bring his sight back either. Removing it gives us a chance, that's all. A chance is better than none. Nantan studied her for a long moment. Many men have come through this land selling chances, he said. Most of them ride on before anyone can count what their promises cost. I'm not riding anywhere until we know how this ends, Mara replied. The chief's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Good. He gestured for her to continue. Mara nodded to one of the warriors. I'll need you behind him, she said, tapping her own shoulder to show where his hands should go. Another to his left, another to his right. You hold him firm, but not like he is an enemy. If he struggles, you keep his head still. The men moved into place with the competence of those accustomed to following precise instructions in dangerous moments. Mara dipped a cloth into the hot water, wrung it out, and pressed it gently around Tazhi's eyes, cleaning away the traces of the herbal paste. What is that smell? She asked quietly as she worked. Juniper, Nantan answered, and other things my mother taught my wife before she died. We have used them for sore eyes for many generations. It was good care, Mara said. It kept infection away. Whatever is inside, it's not rotting. That gives us more room to work. She hoped her words offered some comfort. Inside, she clung to them herself. When the skin around Tazhi's eyes was clean and dry, she unwrapped the needle and held it over the steam rising from the clay pot. Then she passed the metal quickly through the flame, counting under her breath until it glowed faintly before cooling again. It was a compromise between the sterile practices she had been taught and the reality of this place, where she could not call for polished instruments from a hospital chest, only the tools she had carried in her bag. She checked the point against her thumbnail. Sharp. True. Tazhi, she said, I am going to touch your eyelid first. Just the lid. I want you to tell me, in your own words, what you feel. Do not try to be brave for your father or for me. I need the truth more than I need your courage right now. The young man swallowed. I am not afraid of pain, he said. I don't doubt that, Mara replied. But pain has many shapes. Some kinds we can walk through. Some kinds mean we must change what we are doing. You understand? After a moment, he nodded. Mara positioned herself so that the light from the fire caught his face as best it could. One of the warriors shifted his grip, fingers firm against Tazhi's temple, thumb raced along his jaw. Mara brought the needle close. Her hand did not shake. That was one mercy of all the long nights she had spent cutting bullets out of men who screamed for their mothers. Her stomach might twist, but her fingers remembered their work. The needle's point kissed the tender skin of Tazhi's upper lid. He hissed through his teeth. Like a thorn? She asked. Yes. Like a coal? No. Like a thorn. Good, she murmured. She made a tiny scratch along the lid, not enough to draw more than a bead of blood. It welled dark against his skin, then slowed. Breathe, she reminded him. He did, shoulders rising and falling under the warrior's hands. Nantan had not moved. His eyes tracked the needle, as if it were a snake poised above his son's face. Mara cleaned the little mark, then leaned back for a moment. Her own lungs felt tight. That was to show you what a small cut feels like, she told Tazhi. The place I truly need to touch is the surface of your eye. More sensitive, more dangerous. You may feel as if every part of you wants to pull away. The men behind you will keep you still, but you must fight that urge from within too. If you jerk, if you twist, I will not, Tazhi said hoarsely. I know you don't wish to, she said, but knowing and doing are not always the same. That is why I speak of it now. She gave him a moment, watching his face. Then she met Nantan's gaze. This is the point where most men I treat decide whether they truly wish to go on, she said quietly. Once I touch the eye itself, there will be no easy turning back. I can stop if you ask me to now. I will not think less of either of you. Nantan looked at his son. Tazhi's jaw clenched. If you stop now, he said, I stay in darkness. If you keep going, there is a path. I already chose. The chief's throat worked. So did I, he said. He turned back to Mara. Do it. The words lay between them like a flint struck against steel. Mara nodded once. She dipped the needle again, cooled it, and brought it up. As she leaned in, the rest of the world narrowed to a single point. The small, clouded sphere of Tazhi's eye and the infinitesimal space between its surface and the tip of her instrument. She set her left hand lightly against his brow to steady herself. In a moment, she murmured, more to him than to herself. Tazhi's lashes fluttered. Mara exhaled slowly, letting all the noise in her head fall away. Then she set the needle against the very edge of his eye. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The needle kissed the clouded surface of Tazhi's eye. His whole body locked. The cords in his neck stood out, his fingers carving grooves into his own knees as the three warriors behind him clamped down harder on his shoulders and arms. Mara felt every tremor through the point of metal balanced between her fingertips. Easy, she breathed. Don't chase the pain. Let it pass through. Tazhi's teeth clicked together. It is not passing, he rasped. It will, she said. Breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. She kept her left hand braced against his brow, thumbs spread across his temple, the way she had a dozen times before with other men in other rough shelters. The right hand worked alone, the slender needle like an extra bone extending from her fingers. The surface of the eye gave with a soft resistance, a tiny yielding that made Mara's stomach twist even as her hand stayed steady. A clear tear of moisture welled where the needle touched and slicked along the metal. There, she whispered. That's the first layer. You're doing well. If this is well, Tazhi hissed, I do not wish to know badly. A warrior behind him gave a low, involuntary chuckle. It broke the tightness in the air for half a breath. Mara took that breath. Then she eased the needle along the curve of the globe, not pushing deeper, just sliding, letting instinct and memory map the path she could not see. The clouded cornea distorted what lay beneath. She had to feel with more than her eyes now. Tell me, she said quietly. Sharp, dull, pressure, burning. What kind of pain? Sharp, he said through clenched teeth, like a thorn. Then pressure, like a stone in a boot that is too small for your foot. That is good, she said. Stones can be taken out. You speak of impossible things, he muttered. Not today, she said. The needle's tip scraped something that was not soft. The sensation jolted up through the shaft, a tiny vibration that landed in the pads of her fingers. She froze, breath catching halfway between lungs and throat. There you are. Her heart kicked hard enough that she felt it in her ears. What is it? Nantan's voice came low, then sharp from her right. I've touched something harder than the eye should be, she said. I think I've found it. A murmur ran around the cramped shelter. The warriors didn't move, but Mara felt their attention lean closer. Tazhi made a strained sound. Whatever you found, he ground out. It does not like being found. That makes two of you, Mara said, voice faintly hoarse. Hold steady. This next part is the worst. She adjusted her grip, just a fraction, shifting the angle of the needle so its tip could explore along the tiny hard ridge. It was like feeling the side of a rock with a sewing needle while blindfolded and balancing on one foot. The metal skated, then caught. Tazhi jerked. The warrior at his head tightened his hands, thumb pressed along the jaw, fingers clamped around the skull. Do not move, he murmured in Apache. Mara felt the needle, trying to ride over the obstruction. If she let it slip, she might push the foreign body deeper into the eye, into structures she had no business touching. The thought made her palms suddenly damp. I know, she murmured to herself, as much as to Tazhi. I know. Small steps. She eased the pressure, letting the needle back off a hair's breadth, then slid again, trying to wedge the point between the shard and the soft tissue around it. Another tiny scrape. Another. Each one sent a fresh spike of pain through the boy. She felt him shudder under the warrior's hands. "Say something," she ordered. "Don't go quiet on me. I need to know you're awake." "I am trying not to swear," he grated. "My grandmother would rise from her grave and slap me." "That sounds like a strong woman," Mara said. "You can borrow her strength. Let her handle the words." "You just hold still. Do not speak of my mother's mother as if she is yours," Nantan said. But there was a faint thread of humor under the strain. That, too, helped. Humor smoothed the edge of terror, the way lard smoothed the pan before bread dough went in. The needle's point slid again, and this time snagged. Mara felt the tiniest give, as if a hooked fish had just realized there was a line in its mouth. Now, she drew back slowly, as if any sudden motion would tear the world. Resistance clung to the tip of the needle, stubborn and heavy for something so small. For one awful instant she thought she had misjudged, that she was dragging delicate tissue with it, but then the weight shifted. "Almost," she whispered. "Almost there. Do not move, Tazhi. If you flinch now, we have to start all over." "I will not," he said. His voice shook. But he did not. The point of the needle emerged from the surface of the eye, a clear droplet hanging from it. Something dark floated inside the trembling globe of moisture. Mara didn't allow herself to react. "Not yet. Let him go," she said. The warriors loosened their grips cautiously, but kept their hands close, ready to clamp down if the boy started to thrash. Tazhi sagged between them, every line of his body gone from iron to soaked rope. Sweat ran along his temples and down his neck, soaking the collar of his shirt. "Is it out?" he croaked. "Yes," Mara said. "Don't touch your eye. Whatever you do, don't touch." "I am not that foolish," he muttered. "Pain can make fools of anyone," she said. She held the needle away from his face and leaned toward the small folded cloth she had laid on her lap before starting. A single careful tap dislodged the droplet. It fell onto the center of the white fabric and spread, leaving the dark speck exposed. There. She let herself breathe then. The inside of her chest felt hollowed out. "Water," she said. One of the warriors thrust a cup into her free hand. She set the needle aside, dipped her fingers, and wrung out a clean rag. With the lightest pressure she could manage, she dabbed the corners of Tazhi's eye, wiping away tears and the thin, clear fluid that still seeped from the puncture. He hissed through his teeth. "I know," she murmured. "This part stings." "It will settle." His answering laugh was broken in half. "You are very fond of that word." "Sting?" she asked. "Settle," he said. "Occupational hazard," she replied. She checked the tiny puncture again. It was angry and red, but clean. No torn flap, no jagged edge where there shouldn't be. She had done worse, and with worse tools. "Nantan," she said without looking up. "Come closer." The chief knelt on the other side of his son, his braids sliding over his shoulders. His eyes dark, deep-set, always seeming to miss nothing fixed on Tazhi's face, then flicked to the cloth in Mara's lap. "What did you take from him?" he asked. Mara swallowed. She pinched the center of the cloth and lifted it, bringing the shard into the light. It was no bigger than the crescent of nail on her smallest finger, irregular and wicked. One edge glittered where it had been sheared, razor-sharp. The body of it was a dense, almost black green, the color of pine needles seen in a bottle's shadow. Inside, tiny bubbles froze the memory of whatever fire had created it. Nantan sucked in a breath through his nose. "That small?" he said quietly. "So small, and yet it stole his sight," Mara finished. She felt Tazhi's attention on her, tight as a drawn bowstring. "Can I see it?" he asked. Mara hesitated. "It will mean nothing to you yet," she said gently. "You'd only feel the cloth." "Then tell me," he said. "Tell me what it looks like." I want my mind to put teeth on the thing that bit me. The turn of phrase made something in her chest twist. It's dark green, she said, like a bottle. Not thin, like window glass thicker. Stronger. It was made to hold something important. Near one edge, there's a mark. A curve, like the start of a circle. Or the tip of a letter. A letter of your people, Nantan said. Most likely, Mara said. The warriors leaned closer, their faces intent. It is just glass, one of them said in Apache. Broken in fire. Glass does not fly by itself into a boy's eye, another answered. It had help. Powder, Nantan murmured. Yes, Mara said softly. Powder. A blast strong enough to fuse sand and shatter bottles and drive shards through flesh. She wanted to focus on the shard and nothing else. It was easier than thinking about what it meant. Easier to treat this like any other fragment that needed to be catalogued, studied, understood. Elias's voice sounded from the entrance flap. Doc, he said. How bad is he? Mara glanced back briefly. He's alive, she said. The shard is out. The rest. She turned back to Tazhi. We don't know yet. Can he see? Nantan demanded. Mara bit the inside of her cheek. Tazhi, she said, tell me truth, not hope. Close your good eye. I'm going to loosen this lid again. Stare straight ahead. Don't chase anything. Let it come to you. She slid a fingertip to his brow and lifted the swollen lid. The eye beneath looked raw and furious. The cloudiness was still there, like milk poured into ink, but behind it, something moved. Not much, not clear. A shadow within a shadow. Tazhi, she whispered. Do you feel anything? Any difference at all? At first he said nothing. Her stomach sank. Then he made a sound halfway between surprise and anger. There is. Something, he said slowly. Before, it was all one piece. Dark inside dark. No, he swallowed. There is a place that feels. Thinner. A line. There. He raised his hand, shakier than before, and pointed, missing her shoulder by a finger's width. His aim drifted, then corrected, settling roughly in the direction of the shelter's opening, where pale daylight bled along the edges of the hanging hide. Like someone cut the hide with a knife, he said, voice low. Not enough for me to crawl through, but enough for light to try. Relief hit Mara so hard, she had to resist the urge to sit back on her heels and laugh like an idiot. Instead, very carefully, she let the lid slip down again. That's all we look for today, she said. More will only make it angrier. So? Nantan pressed. Does he see? He feels light, Mara said. That means the path from eye to mind isn't completely destroyed. How much of it can come back? I don't know. The body remembers. Sometimes it forgives. Sometimes it doesn't. You do not promise, Nantan said. I don't gamble with other people's futures, she said quietly. Not with words. Silence pressed in for a heartbeat. Then the chief nodded once. We asked for truth, he said. You give it, even when it tastes bitter. I can coat it in sugar if you like, Mara said. It won't change what it is. The corner of Nantan's mouth twitched, gone in an instant. That will not be necessary, he said. She reached again for her supplies, cleaned the puncture gently once more, then took up a strip of soft linen. With slow, firm motions, she wrapped a fresh bandage around Tazhi's head, covering the injured eye. No rubbing, no pressing, she said. You treat this eye as if it were a child who just woke from a bad dream. Gentle, patient, no shaking. What of the other eye? Tazhi asked. Let it work, she said. It's going to be busy for a while. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a sigh of relief. Does this mean I can sleep? He asked. It means you must, she said. Your body has work to do. It does that better when you're not arguing with it. I do not argue, he said. Liar, she murmured. His smile was faint, but it was there. Mara sat back at last, every joint in her body complaining. Fatigue drifted in, the delayed wave after a tide of focus. She caught Nantan watching her. "You will stay in my camp until we know how his eye settles," he said. Again, not a question. "Yes," she said simply. "You take my son's sight into your hands," he said. "You take a piece of this." He nodded at the cloth in her lap. "You will not slip away with either." "Chief," she said softly, "if I meant to run, I would have done it before I stuck a needle into an Apache boy's eye." The ghost of a smile flickered again. "That would have been wise," he said. "But perhaps you are not wise in the usual ways." "I've been told that," she said. He rose in one smooth motion that belied his age and rank. "Rest," he said. "When the sun goes down, I will listen to my council. They will want to know what you pulled from my son, and what you plan to do with it," she said. He inclined his head. "They always want that," he said, and ducked out of the shelter. Tazhi lay back with a small grunt, one arm folded behind his head, as if he were pretending this was any other day that had simply grown too long. Mara watched his chest rise and fall until his breaths evened. Pain still creased his brow, but exhaustion won in the end. Only then did she allow herself to unfold the cloth again. The shard glittered up at her like an unblinking eye. By the time night settled fully over the camp, fires burned low and steady. Men's voices turned from sharp to soft. Somewhere, a drum thumped a slow, patient beat. Mara sat cross-legged just inside the smaller shelter, the shard cradled in her palm. A small glass lens from her satchel lay on her knee, the one concession she had brought west out of the tidy world of lecture halls and polished instruments. Elias leaned against the main support pole opposite her, a tin cup dangling from his fingers. He'd brought coffee from one of the cook fires. It smelled overboiled and bitter. It also smelled like staying awake. "Well?" he asked. "Well, what?" she said. "What does the little monster tell you?" He nodded at her hand. She slid the shard under the lens, bringing it closer to the lantern that had been hung from the roof poles. The yellow light made the glass glow faintly green. "Hard to say," she murmured. "Doctor talk for too much and not enough at once," he said. "Something like that," she said. Under magnification, the bubbles inside the glass were even more visible. Some clustered in a thin line, as if a seam had once run there. Along one edge, the etched curve read clearer now. It wasn't a perfect arc. There were tiny strokes at one end, where the glass had sheared off from a larger design. "Crescent," Elias said suddenly. She glanced up. "What?" "The way it curves," he said, tapping the air. "Looks like the edge of a crescent moon. We've got bottles back at the Fort dark green like that. Too fancy for common men. Crescent Creek whiskey. Officers pass it around when they want to impress railroad guests." Mara's stomach tightened. She looked back at the shard. The curve, the thickness, the color it fit. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Sure enough," he said. "Quartermaster bragged about the crates when they arrived. Straight from St. Louis," he said. "Best glass this side of the Mississippi." "Glass," she repeated. "Funny how men will brag about glass and forget about powder in the same breath," Elias said. Mara imagined the freight wagon, crates of whiskey stacked beside barrels of blasting powder, rattling along a rough track. A single spark, a carelessly tossed match, a jolt strong enough to make something slam, then fire, then shards, flying like a cloud of invisible teeth. She closed her fingers slowly around the shard. "Tazhi was close enough," she said quietly. "Close enough that this went straight into his eye." "Looks that way," Elias said. "Was it one of our wagons?" she asked. "From the fort?" He lifted a shoulder. "If the powder was for the crews laying track west of here, most likely. Powder comes in under Army authority, even if it's meant for civilian crews. Cheaper that way, more convenient. And if it blows up in the wrong place, someone up the chain washes their hands and blames the air. Unless someone makes them do more than wash," she said. He watched her, eyes narrowed. You thinking of marching that little piece of glass right up to Colonel Avery and tapping it against his teeth? He asked. Something like that, she said. That'll get his attention, Elias said. Might even get someone's hide. Yours, if you're not careful. Mara looked back down at the shard. Her father's voice drifted out of some deep, tired corner of her memory. Asterisk a wound is a story written in flesh, girl. If you don't read it, someone else will, and they'll tell it wrong. Asterisk, I can just put it in a box and pretend it is a curiosity, she said. It isn't. It's the end of a chain. Somewhere at the other end is a man who signed a paper and loaded a wagon like a child stacking toys. And you think if you pull that chain hard enough, he'll fall on his face at your feet? Elias asked. I think, she said slowly, that if nobody pulls, he'll keep loading wagons the same way. Maybe next time the shard ends up in a soldier's skull instead of a boy's eye, or a woman's spine, or a baby's chest. He stared at her for a long moment. You always think in pictures like that? He asked. Yes, she said. It's inconvenient. He huffed a short laugh. Doc, he said, you start tugging, the whole line will feel it. Railroad men, officers, investors back east who've never seen a mesquite tree, let alone the people living under it. They don't like feeling ropes around their wrists. Maybe they shouldn't tie them around other people's necks then, she said. His eyes flickered. Well, he said, at least if they shoot you, you'll die poetic. Before she could answer, a low voice sounded at the entrance. Mara, Nantan's silhouette, filled the narrow opening. He ducked inside, bringing the smell of smoke and juniper with him. Behind him, 2 older warriors stepped in as well, including the gray-haired one whose face looked carved from root and stone. Mara tucked the lens away and opened her hand, showing the shard. You have spoken with your men, she said. I have listened, Nantan corrected. Now we speak to you. He settled cross-legged on the packed earth, his knees and shoulders cracking softly. The others joined him without a word. Elias moved slightly to the side, not leaving, but making clear he knew this circle belonged to them. The chief nodded at Mara's palm. Tell us again what that is, he said. A piece of glass, she said, from a bottle likely. Dark green, thick, with an etched mark that might be part of a crescent. Your son thinks of it as a snake. I think of it as the tooth from a beast someone set loose without thinking. Whose tooth? The gray-haired warrior asked. Possibly Crescent Creek whiskey, she said. An expensive brand. Men with money and friends in the railroad drink it. The wagons that bring it west usually travel under Army protection. Powder rode with it. Something went wrong. The blast drove this into Tazhi's eye. Your people's whiskey. Your powder, the warrior said. Yes, she said. She didn't soften it. Nantan's gaze sharpened. If we give this to your colonel, he said, what will he do? That depends who he is, she said. He might trace the shipment. He might ask who signed the order, who loaded the wagon, who decided it was safe to haul powder and bottles together. He might court-martial a man who was careless. Or he might say accidents happen and go back to his papers. And if he uses it to say to his superiors, see how we investigate ourselves, how we punish our own. Trust us, give us more land, more track? The gray-haired warrior asked. Then you will know his truth, she said. Right now, you only know what he says around campfires when you are not near enough to hear. If you bring this to him, you will hear the words he uses when he cannot pretend he doesn't know. And if we do nothing? Another man asked. Then you live with a boy whose eye was broken by a force that stays nameless, she said. And the men who loaded that wagon sleep well. Nantan's jaw flexed. My people are not fond of nameless things, he said quietly. Neither is infection, Mara said before thinking. He tilted his head. Infection, he repeated. A wound that hides dirt or splinters can look fine from the outside for a while, she said. Then one day it swells, then bursts, and poisons everything around it. But if you open it early, clean it, you let light and air in. It hurts more at first, bleeds more. Sometimes the man curses you, but it heals better after. Are you saying we must cut this wound open? The gray-haired warrior asked. I'm saying it's already there, she replied. You can either pretend it isn't and wait to see how it rots, or you can look at it with both eyes and decide what to do. Silence lay over them like a heavy blanket. I do not like bringing my son where your soldiers keep their guns, Nantan said at last. I wouldn't either, she said. But if I go without him, they will say I speak from anger, not from harm, he went on. They will call it a complaint, not a wound. And if he rides with us, Mara said, bandage and all, they will not be able to pretend it's a story told third hand. The chief's mouth thinned. You want to set my boy in front of your colonel like a broken rifle, he said. Look what your men did. No, Mara said softly. I want him to stand like a man whose body holds the truth, you re-asking the colonel to see. There's a difference. Nantan considered her, expression unreadable. My counsel is divided, he said. Some say we should turn our backs on your fort and your tracks and your whiskey and let the earth swallow whatever happens on your side of the horizon. Others say we should carry this, he nodded at the shard, back to your walls and hammer it into them until wood and stone bleed. And you? She asked. I say I am tired of being spoken about instead of spoken to, he said. If I bring this to your colonel, he cannot say later that he did not know. The gray-haired warrior grunted. Knowledge does not always shame men who should be shamed, he said. No, Nantan agreed, but it shames those who will listen to us instead of him. They need to know we offered him a chance and watched what he did with it. He looked at Mara again. You said we would decide together, he said. This is my part. What is yours? She looked down at the shard. It lay quiet, but she felt the echo of its journey. Bottle to crate, crate to wagon, wagon to explosion, explosion to bone and blood and soft, helpless eye. I can walk beside you into the fort, she said. I can tell the colonel what I did, what I saw, what this is. I can speak in the language that he respects on paper. I can watch his face while he answers you. And I can decide, after that, whether I keep patching his men up as if nothing is wrong or whether something in me changes. Elias let out a low breath. Careful, Doc, he said. You're talking about changing the contract you signed with this territory. Maybe the ink was never as dry as they thought, she said. Nantan nodded once, decisively. Then we go, he said, at first light. You, the boy if he can ride, 2 of my men, and your watcher. He jerked his chin toward Elias. Elias lifted his cup in a half salute. We'll give the sentries something to talk about, he said. Will your colonel shoot first? The younger warrior asked. No, Elias said. He's too worried about what his superiors would say if he turned an Apache chief away from his gate in broad daylight while a doctor stood beside him. He likes looking reasonable. Reasonable, the older man repeated, as if tasting a strange herb. Mara folded the cloth back over the shard. I'll keep this on me until we stand in front of him, she said. If someone decides it would be convenient if it got lost on the way, they'll have to go through me to make that happen. Nantan's eyes warmed by a degree. Many of your people talk like warriors, he said. Fewer mean it. I talk like a doctor, she said. We're worse. Tazhi didn't sleep long. He woke a little after midnight, if the shift in the camp's sounds was any guide. His unbandaged eye gleamed dully in the lantern's glow as he turned his head. Mara, he whispered. I'm here, she said. She hadn't lain down yet. Her body hummed too loud from the day. What are you doing? He asked. She considered the cloth-wrapped bundle now tucked into the inner pocket of her dress. Thinking about small things that make big trouble, she said. That is how most trouble begins, he said. With something small. He moved his hand toward his face, then stopped short before his fingers brushed the bandage. You listened to my father, he said. What did his counsel say? That you're stubborn, she said. That is not news, he replied. She smiled in spite of herself. They said you should ride with us to the fort, if you can sit a horse, she added. He went very still. Why? He asked. Because your eye holds a story they can't ignore, she said. And because your father is tired of speaking to walls. Will they stare? He asked. Yes, she said. Good, he said softly. She blinked. You like people staring at you? She asked. I like them having to use both eyes, he said. I like them having to see what their powder did. If I am afraid for that, I am afraid for the wrong things. Fear isn't always wrong, she said. He tilted his head. Are you afraid? He asked. Yes, she said. Of the fort, of the colonel, of the answers we might get, and the ones we might not. You come anyway, he said. Yes, she said. Good, he said again. He lay quiet for a while. Mara, he said eventually. Yes? Tonight, when I closed my good eye, I could still feel that thin place, he said. The crack in the hide. It burns, not like fire, like when you step from shade into bright light after too long in a cave. Too much all at once, she said. Yes, he murmured. Sometimes that means the eye is waking up, she said. You kept it in darkness. It remembers what light is, even if it doesn't know what to do with it yet. I remember too, he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. She pressed her palm flat against the packed earth, grounding herself. Then maybe you and the eye can meet in the middle, she said. He huffed a small breath that might have been a laugh. I will tell it to hurry, he said. Not too fast, she said. Haste makes rough stitches. Is that a saying from your people? He asked. It is now, she said. Later, when his breathing deepened and the camp slipped into its own kind of uneasy sleep, Mara finally lay down on her side, her back to the support pole. The shard's weight against her ribs felt like a second, smaller heartbeat. When she dreamed, if she dreamed at all, it was of a line of light cutting through a dark hide, and of hands hers, Nantan's, the colonel's reaching toward it from 3 different directions. They rode at dawn. Not with ceremony, not with fanfare, just with the quiet, efficient movements of people who had done hard things often enough to know shouting about them wasted breath. Mara checked Tazhi's bandage one more time before he mounted. The skin around his eye was less angry than the night before, the puncture already forming a thin, fragile crust. Any new changes? She asked. The light line is still there, he said. Sometimes thin, sometimes wide. It moves when I move my head. That's good, she said. That means your eye is talking to the world outside it again. What is it saying? He asked. That it's confused and cranky, she said. But awake. He nodded solemnly, as if accepting an apology from a stubborn uncle. Nantan helped him onto a sturdy paint gelding, then swung up behind him. His arm encircled his son without smothering him, a brace and a tether both. Mara mounted her own moray, grateful that at least one part of this day would feel simple. The sway of the saddle, the squeak of leather, the way the animal moved under her as if they shared a spine. Elias took point. 2 of Nantan's warriors rode flanking the small group, their faces impassive, their eyes sharp. The fork rose out of the distance slowly, its stockade sending clean lines against the land. Mara watched it grow, that familiar arrangement of walls and angles and watchtowers, until it was close enough that she could see figures on the parapets. Remember, Elias called over his shoulder, let me ride ahead. They see Apache horses come up first. Some trigger-happy fool will earn himself a promotion he doesn't live to enjoy. Nantan grunted. What you call promotion, we call another grave, he said. Exactly why I like to talk first, Elias replied. He put his heels to his horse and trotted ahead alone. Mara watched the gate as he approached. After a moment, she saw the movement she was waiting for. Men on the walls leaning, pointing, then someone yelling down. The gate creaked. Space appeared between the rough-hewn timbers. Elias gestured. "Ready," Mara said. They rode as one. Eyes tracked them from above as they passed into the fort's shadow. Some faces were curious, some hard, some carefully blank. She saw a few she recognized from the infirmary, men whose arms she had splinted, whose ribs she had wrapped, whose fevers she had walked through the long nights. They looked at her differently now, not as their surgeon, as something between bridge and threat. Colonel Avery waited on the parade ground, surrounded by a ring of officers and sergeants. His uniform sat on him like it had been starched while he was still inside it. "Mistress Ellison," he called, voice carrying. "You bring guests." Mara swung down from her saddle, ignored the way her knees threatened to wobble, and turned to see Nantan dismount. The chief landed on his feet with the casual grace of a man who had been getting on and off horses since before the colonel had memorized which fork matched which course. He reached up and steadied Tazhi as his son slid down in front of him. The boy stood with his shoulders back. The bandage around his head could have made him look fragile. It did not. He looked like someone who had gone to the edge of something and returned, changed but unbroken. Colonel Avery's gaze flicked over him, lingered a fraction too long, then snapped to Nantan. "You come under a flag of peace?" he asked. "I come under a flag of truth," Nantan said. His English carried the rhythm of his own tongue. "Your doctor cut my son." She took something from his eye. "We bring it back to you." The colonel's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is that so?" he said. "Yes," Mara said, stepping forward. "Do you remember the freight wagon that exploded near the South Ridge 3 days ago, Colonel?" His brows drew together. "I remember hearing about a regrettable incident involving powder," he said. "The details are for my quartermaster to sort. Why?" "Because your regrettable incident drove this into Tazhi's eye," she said. She reached into her bodice and carefully drew out the folded cloth. She unwrapped it and held the shard up where he could see it. "This is glass," she said, "likely from a bottle of Crescent Creek whiskey. Thick, dark, fancy, the kind your officers favor. It traveled in a wagon with powder. When the powder went off, the bottles shattered. One of the pieces went looking for new home and found one in this boy." A murmur went through the soldiers circling them. Crescent Creek was a name they knew. The colonel's jaw flexed. "Men are injured every day along this line," he said. "Blasts, cave-ins, accidents. That is the nature of progress. I regret the boy was harmed, but we did not ride here for regret," Nantan cut in. "We rode here so that when you drink from your bottles, you will know what else they carried." Colonel Avery's gaze cut to the shard, then back to Mara. "You removed this yourself?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I made a controlled puncture, traced the foreign body, and extracted it. His eye still senses light. If we're careful, and if his body chooses to heal well, he may regain some sight. If not, he will still carry the scar of your shipment." "My shipment?" the colonel said sharply. "Your forts," she said. "Your authority. Your quartermaster's signature. Your powder. If a civilian crewman mishandled it, then you will find his name," she said, "and the name of the man who told him he could haul powder and glass together along trails children use. Then you'll decide whether their convenience is worth an eye." The colonel's mouth thinned. He knew he was being watched, not just by his own men, but by Nantan's warriors and, beyond them, by whatever network of attention Apache carried by foot and word across the ridges. He looked down at the shard again. "Convenience," he repeated. Elias spoke up, his tone deceptively mild. "Colonel, if word starts drifting east that supply wagons under Fort Authority are exploding next to Apache camps, there'll be questions," he said. railroad questions, investor questions, men who care less about progress than about whether someone's carelessness delays their profits. Avery's nostrils flared. "I'm well aware of my responsibilities, Ward," he said. "You may keep your expertise for the firing range." "Of course, sir," Elias said. The colonel's attention returned to the shard. "Very well," he said at last, each word clipped. "I'll have the quartermaster pull his manifests. We'll find which shipment of Crescent Creek this might have come from, who requested it, and where it was bound. I'll send a man to speak with the track crews about the explosion. If anyone under my authority was negligent with powder, I'll see charges brought." Mara felt the tension in her spine ease a fraction. "And you will send word," Nantan said. "To you," the colonel said. "Yes," Nantan replied. "Through her." He nodded at Mara. "We will hear what you found. We will hear what you did. We will remember." The colonel's eyes hardened. He didn't like having a line tied from his decisions to another man's memory. "That is irregular," he said. "So is glass in the eye of an Apache boy from a wagon carrying your whiskey," Nantan replied. The gathered soldiers shifted. Some smirked. Some looked nervous. A few looked away. Avery exhaled slowly. "Very well," he said again. "When my investigation is complete, I'll have a written report prepared. Mistress Ellison can convey the contents to you." Mara nodded once. "May I hold on to the shard in the meantime?" she asked. "I'd like to take a closer look under proper light. For medical purposes." He considered that. Then, to her surprise, he folded the cloth back around the glass and handed it to her. "Keep it," he said. "I've no taste for souvenirs of accidents." Her fingers closed around it. "You may find you do," she said quietly, "if it helps you see where your line is fraying." The colonel's eyes chilled. "Careful, Mistress Ellison," he said. "You're here as a surgeon, not a moralist. Sometimes those jobs overlap," she said. Elias's shoulder brushed hers for a second, a silent warning and a wordless support at once. Avery turned his attention back to Nantan. "Is there anything else you require from my fort today?" he asked. "Yes," Nantan said. The colonel braced himself. "I require that your men see my son standing here," the chief said. "That they remember his face when they load their wagons. That next time they stack crates and powder together, they see his bandage instead of a line on a ledger." The colonel said nothing. Silence held. Then he nodded once, curtly. "They see him," he said. "Good," Nantan replied. He placed his hand on Tazhi's shoulder. "We will go," he said, and turned without waiting to be dismissed. They walked back toward their horses through a field of watching eyes. Some held pity, some guilt, some resentment at having their neat understanding of the world tugged sideways. Mara could feel all of it. She swung into her saddle again and rode beside Nantan as they left the parade ground. Only when they had passed back under the shadow of the gate did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Elias guided his horse up alongside hers. "You do realize," he said, "you just put a burr under the colonel's saddle that he's going to feel every time he sits down." "Good," she said. "That burr might look a lot like you over the next few weeks," he added. "I expected that," she said. "You still plan to keep patching his men up?" he asked. "I plan to keep patching whoever lands on my table," she said. "But I might ask more questions about how they got there." He gave a low whistle. "Dangerous habit," he said. "I've collected a few," she replied. Behind them, Nantan spoke softly in Apache to his son. Mara caught only pieces, but she heard the words for eye, light, and path. Tazhi's head turned slightly. "Next time we come here," he said aloud, voice carrying enough that she and Elias heard, "I will see it with both eyes." There was no bravado in the statement. Just a quiet, fierce certainty that made Mara's skin prickle. "And if you don't?" Elias asked. "Then I will still know exactly what I am refusing," Tazhi said. "I will not say yes to anything I have not looked at with all I have." Mara swallowed. "That means," she said, "I had better do my part." "You already did," he said. "Not all of it," she replied. She touched the hidden cloth through the fabric of her dress. The shard felt smaller, now that the colonel had seen it, but no less sharp. As their horses moved away from the fort and back toward the open land, she looked once over her shoulder. Soldiers still watched from the walls. Some leaned on rifles. Some leaned on nothing more than their own curiosity. Colonel Avery was not among them. He had retreated, no doubt, to his office, his ledgers, his reports. Perhaps he would send the rider he had promised. Perhaps the manifests would be pulled, and a careless man would answer for the way he de-stacked his wares. Or perhaps the shard in her hand would prove more dangerous to the men in power than they were willing to admit, and someone would start thinking about how to shut her up. Either way, the wound was open now. Light had found the crack. What grew from that scar, infection, or something harder and cleaner, was no longer entirely under any one person's control. Mara turned her face back toward the trail, toward the Apache camp, toward Tazhi's waiting bandage and the long, stubborn road his eye would have to walk. She had stepped into something larger than a single surgery. She knew it. She felt it like the thrum of a low drum under the soles of her feet. But for the first time since she'd come west, she also felt, deep down where fear and conviction shared a border, that she was exactly where she needed to be, between worlds, knife in hand. Eyes open. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.